Welcome to Meet the Candidate with your host, Sulani Madsen. Meet the Candidate is your opportunity to see local candidates and hear about the experiences that have shaped their lives. Meet the Candidate is a nonpartisan community project brought to you by your friends at the Ponderosa Republican Women's Club, North by Northwest Digital, We Believe, We Vote, and the McGarry Law Office, the landlord's attorney. Now, here's Sulani.
Well, my guest for this session to Meet the Candidate is Andy Dunau, who is running for Spokane City Council, District 2, Position 2. And welcome, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, I always start with the really basic question of where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, which is outside of Washington, D.C. Born and raised there all the way through high school before going off to college in the Midwest, and then went back east for a little while before heading west.
Okay, how big of a high school did you go to?
It was a big high school. It was over 2,100 kids.
Oh, nice. So lots of opportunities for different extracurricular activities. And what did you like to do?
What did I like to do? Well, let's see. I was in the marching band, and I did a lot of things which we don't talk about now that I'm 58 years old.
Yes, I'm sometimes glad that I grew up before everybody had a phone with a camera on
Exactly
it.
right.
Yeah.
But always into sports, always into the outdoors, always going out and doing things with friends.
Okay. So when you went to college, where did you go to college?
I went to Grinnell College, which is a small liberal arts college in Iowa.
And studied?
Studied political science. And then about 3 or 4 years later, went to New York University, where I got my master's in public administration. And I was a research associate and worked on Governor Cuomo's fiscal and economic priorities.
Okay. Well, one of the other things I like to ask people about, because it does tell you something about lessons they've learned, is your first job where you were connecting working to pay.
Right. So the very first job was mowing lawns.
That's a good
how
basic
I got
one.
my cash when I was growing up. So there were about 10 or 15 lawns I used to mow in the general neighborhood, and used to smell like gasoline when I was done and be all hot and sweaty, but I had a little cash to walk around with.
Yeah. And graduated on to something more serious in high school, or
No, once I got through college and did all the normal odd jobs in college and worked construction and those types of things, then I worked in the publishing industry for about a year or two and did a lot of freelance work. And then I went to graduate school and became a researcher.
Okay, so what kind of research did you focus on?
We did the original research when fiber optics were sort of brand new, and we were looking at the various ways it was going to move around the country along rights-of-ways and rails, and we came up with a formula trying to predict where back offices would locate in cities like Spokane and the rest of it, and what would happen to big cities like Los Angeles, New York. So basically we were predicting what the future was going to be given all the new telecommunications abilities.
That's fascinating. And then the follow-up question I want to ask is how many of the predictions have proven?
I wrote the model, which basically predicted where back offices, which is sort of the administrative functions for credit cards and whatnot, would locate, and they were still using that model 15 years later. So the predictions turned out to be quite good.
That's pretty cool, when you can see how your work comes out.
It is very cool, and it's very applicable to Spokane and other cities like us today. A lot of the jobs we get are based on the notion that you have a ready and willing labor force that's pretty well educated. A lot of females, frankly, looking for that extra job. So the demographics of Spokane definitely has attracted those types of jobs, and it's important to know if you want to grow our economy.
Well, so what brought you to Spokane?
I was living in Los Angeles for a couple of years, and I was that's where I started my business, and I was deeply involved in K-12 education. But my oldest son was a year old, and we decided that we did not want to raise him in a big city like Los Angeles. So I had some friends who had moved to Spokane the year before, and they said, why don't you try this for a while? And that was the beginning.
So that's not, you've been here for a while then?
I moved up here in 1989 with my family, so it's been 28 years.
Yeah. And where have you worked in the Spokane area?
Well, so first of all, I'm a small business owner, so
Okay.
I manage 3 small nonprofit organizations. One of them locally is the Spokane River Forum, so we work on all things Spokane River, promoting it and talking about the issues and getting people to dialogue on what we can do better. We started the Spokane River Water Trail, which is very popular, putting thousands of people out on the river with new access. We started the Got Waste Directory, which is also really popular, over 35,000 page views last year, just to figure out the best way, proper way to get rid of your waste, which helps the aquifer in river. So we've done a number of jobs like that, but we also work in the Upper Columbia with the Lake Roosevelt Forum. We work throughout the Northwest with a group called the Foundation for Water and Energy Education, which looks at hydropower issues. And locally, we're also the facilitators for the Voluntary Stewardship Program, which is working with the ag community, getting them into voluntary incentive compliance with the Growth Management Act.
Okay. So what kind of travel have you done that has given you something for comparison? I'm always looking for interesting experiences that have shaped people's point of view, and sometimes travel is a part of that. Has that been part of your background or not so much?
Absolutely. I mean, everything from last year, I went to Africa, for, the proverbial 2-week tour, and learned a lot about, what's going on in emerging countries and things like that. But locally, for instance, tomorrow I'm going to Yakima, and what you really learn is that a society or a culture is also defined by its geography. So if you look at Spokane, we have the classic Western mentality. We're right on the border of the Rockies, heading into the upper plains there, or the plains heading west. And there's sort of a Midwestern, basic, sound, conservative culture. And people chip in and work together, and there's a sense of this community and what we all are trying to put into the community. Totally different than if you go to Seattle or Los Angeles or New York, all places I've been. And those are big urban environments where there's not nearly as much interactivity amongst people except in these sort of conclaves. And so you don't get that level of diversity either, but you also don't get that great sharing of community that we get in Spokane.
Well, it's an interesting point that the larger cities may have an overall higher diversity, but when people group themselves in these smaller conclaves, in a way they have less diversity. That they're
exactly right. Exactly right. And in some ways are more isolated. It's in some ways harder to get across the city and make new friends than in an environment like we have.
Whereas a Hoop Fest is coming up at the time we're recording this, and that's an all community, everybody in kind of
absolutely right
kind
That's
of event.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So you had you said you came here to raise your kids, and where did they go to school?
So my two oldest boys, who now live in Seattle, went to LC, Lewis and Clark, I should say, and my daughter is just finished 7th grade in Sacagawea Middle School.
Sacagawea is where I went to school.
There you
I
go.
went to Ferris, so that's a Spokane thing. You have to see where
you
did you go to school, and
absolutely. And they both played on the soccer team, so we're quite clear about the rivalries as well.
Well, you'll miss Hammond Regal since you're at LC, but
there you go.
So. Thinking of another question, what's something that you may have learned in your past that you really feel is applicable to the city council position?
So my 30-year consulting practice is really based on collaboration and building partnerships and communication. So one of the reasons I got into this race was because I sort of have this sense that locally and nationally we're going farther to the left and farther to the right. And I spent a lifetime trying to get people to common ground in the middle to come up with innovative solutions. So I've worked with folks where you've got federal agencies, tribes, stakeholders, and others who normally don't get along, and gotten them to the table to find ways to get along. And I think now more than ever, that's where we need to be as a community, getting back to the center to get things done.
Was it just that observation of the polarization, or was there some other triggering event that said, this year, this time, I really need to step up and file for office?
Well, Part of it was the approach I just talked about, but part of it's also priorities. I think we're at a point where we really need to get back to focusing on basic services. So when I'm knocking on doors, the number one issue on people's minds is the condition of the streets. So why are we not being much more proactive about getting in front of the pothole issue when you know in January or February it's going to be bad? Supporting police and fire. Got to make those infrastructure investments if we're going to grow the job base and create a welcoming business environment. Got to give city employees technology and other tools to be able to do their job. Some of them are using very old, archaic technology to get their job done. So I felt like, if Spokane's going to have another good 20, 30-year run, we got to get back to basics, and we need to really focus on those basics.
Okay, well, I think we're coming to the close of our time here, and I'll give you that last softball question. Why should voters choose Andy Dunau for Spokane City Council District 2 Position 2?
So when I see a need, I'm looking at priorities of government, I'm looking at resource allocation, I'm looking at partnerships that leverage resources, and I'm looking at better ways to build a mousetrap. That's a far cry from what I see going on in City Council now, where there's a lot of tax and spend, there's a lot of ordinance writing, and there's litigation. So we need to get back to getting to that common ground, and I think I'm the guy to do it.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming, Andy, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Meet the Candidate. Spokane Talks Online thanks our community-minded partners at Ponderosa Republican Women's Club, North by Northwest Digital, We Believe, We Vote, and the McGarry Law Office, the landlord's attorney, for helping make Meet the Candidate possible.